Live from the Washington, D.C. area, all empowered citizens need to know about intelligent use of resources, smart governance, inclusive communities, smart industry, and healthy, thriving urbanization. This is Smart Sustainability, the TV talk about shaping a sustainable future in the digital age with Nicolette Stividar. Who still trusts television? Media credibility at an all-time low. Well, surprise, surprise. How much has the media landscape changed, and where might be its future? Our topic tonight. Good evening. Welcome to Smart Sustainability. I'm Nicolette Stividar. According to Gallup, only 11% in 2022 have at least some degree of confidence in television news. The portion of the Democrats being slightly higher than the Republicans, but both are down by 5% points from last year. Confidence and trust, or one should say the lack of trust, is a major issue that affects every part of our life. How we deal with each other, how we engage or disengage with authority, and how that affects us in tackling how we can possibly create our future going forward. Gallup has tracked American confidence in newspapers since 1973 and in television since 1993, 20 years later, as part of its annual polling about major U.S. institutions. TV and newspapers rank nearly at the bottom of that list, actually the very bottom of that list, only with Congress ranking even below that. This says a lot. It puts the validity of our institutions in question, and we're doing actually a separate show on exactly that topic soon. But it also implies that the media better reinvents itself if it wants to survive and have a role in the future. Confidence by a majority of people in newspapers was reported only once above the majority, and that was back in 1979, when 51% of Americans expressed trust in what they were being told. Confidence in television news, by contrast, has never been higher than 46% since beginning the measurement back in 1993. It averaged around 27% since then, which is still considerably higher than what we have now. Remember, currently it's at 11%. In the last 4 years, media confidence was on a steady course of erosion below 20%. The majority of Americans nowadays say they have very little to no confidence at all in television news. 53%, to be exact, say that. And while Democrat confidence in media is slightly above that of Republicans or independents, it is still below average. So what has happened to media? How has the landscape changed? What role did social media play in all of this? And is there actually still a place for television beyond entertainment? Joining me tonight is Mahmoud Khan, a journalist who's been in the industry for 25 years, actually in print, online, as well as on television, and taken the role of an observer a little bit in what happened over the decades. Mahmoud and I both come from international and public media and want to address some of the major changes tonight, that hit the landscape in the last 30 years. Welcome on Smart Sustainability. Mahmoud, great to have you on.
Oh, thank you.
We start right with the landscape of television. Given your background, and you worked in print, you worked online, and you worked in media,
Yep.
What's the landscape currently like? What are we looking at today?
Sure. Yeah. In your intro, you have already told it that media, actually, what I should say in one word, media has lost its credibility in many different ways. So, actually, media is struggling now. We should say the media at this point is to get there. Maybe the long pride that the media had them with them. So they are trying to get it back.
So when we talk about the media, what do we actually currently understand by media? What is your understanding of media? When you hear media, and that's a fairly large, word,
Yeah.
what do you actually understand?
Actually, as a journalist, I always feel like the journalism part is the most part of media. And many people like to believe that media is only the journalism part. Maybe the newspaper, television, radio, or online is now included. So all this. But media is a very big canvas, and it should be other content generating platforms like maybe film or drama, etc. All the thing comes under media. But most people, and me also, first think that journalistic content, that is the media issue that we need to deal with.
Okay, but I think that's exactly at the heart of the problem, because when you look at journalistic content today, who are
Yep.
journalists today versus who were journalists 25 years ago. I remember the time, and I worked in media as well, in international broadcasting mostly, but there were still journalists. You still had those really big names in journalism, anchors and news reporters who actually researched a story and very often would get into conflict, for example, if they should air a story or not. But when you look nowadays and you see what journalists is, most of it has been reduced to copy and paste in print. At least that's what I've been observing. Have you observed something else?
Yeah, you're right. If I can recall my early days in journalism, or maybe actually I was born immediately after the independent war of Bangladesh, that is in 1971, and I born in 1973. So actually, from my childhood, I was going through all the journalism, heroic journalism that happened to my country. Those are the journalists, but the war heroes, like they fought with their parents. I came to know about that. So, and that totally shaped my thinking about journalism. The people who were my predecessor in journalism, always I found them to be actually to be motivated for journalism. But over the period, maybe my initial days in journalism, if I can recall that, those are really great. We had to work hard for something, but nowadays the things are not exactly like that. It is definitely changed, as you said, that copy paste is actually these are the I should say that these are the worst thing that is happening in journalism, because I was writing an article on this someday the newspaper will have to create a new position, the copy-paste editor, because some of the copy-paste people, they even don't know how to copy and paste. They even forget to change the other citation of the other newspaper in his newspaper. So this is all happening. This is actually, I should say, all this happened due to some kind of ignorance, and at the same time, some kind of non-seriousness about the profession that happened.
You know what's really interesting about the copy and paste, and I actually would like to make that point as well, because when I was working in international broadcast media, I would for some time issue a daily, basically, newsletter to just compare the headlines to see what actually all the different stations around the world would say in their headlines, which was a great way because you could really see who was reporting on what and what was their voice or their take on it. If you do this nowadays, so that was about 10, 12 years ago, but if you do the same thing nowadays, you will notice that when you go through all the headlines of all the major stations, it doesn't matter whether this is the BBC, whether this is Deutsche Welle, whether this is CNN, whether this is PBS or many of the other ones, or even you see that the headlines are so similar that sometimes they don't even bother to change some of the words in there. So you could not even track in terms of where was someone coming from, or what's the notion or the voice behind, because it's basically all the same. It's all copy and paste.
And you can see that in the previous days that you mentioned about, like 15, 20 years back, all the reporters who actually covered the event, like they go back to the newsroom and they wrote their own stories, and they always think that what the best thing I can write, and who will lead the next day, who will be talked in the next day, or after publishing the story, that yes, this story, the best story of the event. So these things are absolutely missing now. You will find one content that maybe somewhere someone has generated, and everybody is just copying and pasting that. And I can share you one of my experience, that I was covering a political event. Actually, that was a political rally of a big political party in our country. So, and I took my team over there. And we were continuously giving the updates, like sending the reports. And I was working for an online that time. So it was published already. So I was working, as the rally was, it was huge. So I was working inside a shop, that is a medicine shop. So I took a small place behind their shop. There was a very small room. So I was working there, and all of a sudden I was listening that one television channel is giving the news intro like this and saying something. I was thinking just 5 minutes back or 10 minutes back, I wrote it. So how that television got it? They just picked the whole thing from my newspaper portal and read it by as their customer to read it directly. And I was thinking, wow, this was I wrote it, but I am hearing it from another television channel. So they even don't bother to write their own intro.
Exactly. So it's like it's completely copy and paste. That's what I'm saying. And because we live in a time where everything goes so extremely fast, of course, everything is just copy and paste. And when you look at how a journalist is paid nowadays, you know, there's so many free journalists, freelancers. If you get paid by the words, I mean, who can make a living by that? Almost no one, unless you really crank it out. So that definitely makes a difference. I want to help our viewers here a little bit to understand what the media landscape looks like, because I think there's a difference. So we know we have all the online media by now, and now online is probably a lot more even prevalent or in influencing people than the actual on-air part is. But even on air, I think we need to distinguish, because there are public media, and in different countries, so the public media varies a little bit. Like here in the United States, public media is mostly PBS. In other countries, we have state media, which you see in a lot of the international broadcasters. Actually, the ones that you normally watch when you get your international news, those are state broadcasters.
Right.
And all of them have an agenda to some degree, because everyone wants to have their voice heard from where they stand and how they can influence the public mind. So I think we need to differentiate there a little bit. And then, of course, you have commercial media, commercial television, which is then totally ratings driven and also advertisement driven. So on the one hand, you got public media who get their money from the governments or from the budgets. And then you have, on the other hand, commercial media who get their money from the advertisers and from the viewers. And then, of course, one could argue which model is better. And I think we've actually come to a place where we realize they're both flawed, because both seem to have an agenda and seem to be more influenced by an agenda. So when you look at this, where would you say, is there such a thing as an objective media nowadays?
Actually, I need to laugh on this question, because, as I understand that for last 10 years or maybe 1 decade, it happened that if we pinpoint the main problem of the media, this debacle of media landscape. That is, we should finger on the financing of media, because some people, I can talk on the Asian perspective, or in particular Bangladesh perspective. That is, in our country, many big industrial people, industry owners are investing on media because of they want to secure their own own business. So they think media as their muscle. Not exactly. There's a media. The attitude is not creating one or developing one media for the journalistic purpose or
for the
journalism
people.
for the people. Not that.
Yeah.
To secure his business more effectively.
Right.
For that reason, they go for media. So from that point of view, I want to focus on the finance issue, that who are financing for media. And at the same time, once you are depending on advertisement and etc., so you will always have to compromise your story. That happened actually in our country. It is very common. I'm not quite sure about America, how it is going on, because I have a very less knowledge about it, but I can tell about my...
But that's why I invited you in the first place, because I thought since both of us are not sort of American per se, we've seen more of what's going on there, I think, in an observer role versus being the protagonist and say, this is right, this is wrong. But the financing part is an interesting part. But the question is, can there be even a media model that is financed without being influenced by someone's got to have to influence it. So if it's viewer driven, if you have a certain percentage of viewers, then one could argue and could say, well, it's only what viewers want to see, which means we all know negative news sells best, right? Sensationalism sells best. So then that's what we see on television for the most part. But then if we have other ways of financing, if we take parts of the budget, for example, from households, budgets of states and so on, you have political appointees that kind of have their point of views dictating what you're going to say. And then you have, if you're advertising driven, it's the same thing. Just from different people. So how can we actually get to a model that's neutral?
As you said, the viewer-driven media can always be can happen. As you see, the social media, if you can see that social media has developed, has created their own power. In the sense that they're mostly driven by the users.
Yeah, but not in a good way.
Not in a good way. That is, but definitely the. If on the basis of users' point of view, you can develop something. But the question is, what is your intention about media? So every time who is investing in media, or every time who is actually the working in media as well, I should talk about journalists also, that they always keep one intention in their mind that I will achieve this from this. So this happened. So from that point of view, yes, still it is possible if you can gather some people who really want to, who have a media attitude, they want to take journalism away out of this problem. That may happen.
But let's go over here for a little bit for the beginning of media, because I think that's important. So when you talk about media, you said there's the journalistic experience. Okay, when you go from the journalistic experience, I think most of us do what we do because we have stories to tell. We want things to be heard that we feel normally that maybe is underlit or under not spotlighted or things like that, right? But when you look at the actual origin of media from a business point of view, that's a completely different story, because when you look at how how media was actually, television particularly, how it came into play, well, you have to talk about Hayes, you have to talk about Goebbels, who really used the mass media as a mass media tool to influence the minds of people. And
Yes.
when you see it from that way, that brings me back to what you just said from business people who want to get their thing on the media and think it's muscle, because this is what media was intended for. The first mass media or publicity was to get people support, the American public, by the way, to support the war in the past.
Yep.
So it's always been a mass influencing tool versus an education tool, which of course public media later had sort of they claimed for themselves that they exist to educate and inform and only entertain as a second degree, which has its point.
Yeah.
But I think when we look at the beginning, then marketing, PR, and mass manipulation, we can't really separate them, can we?
Yeah, well, actually we can or we cannot, that is not question, but the question is whether we should or we shouldn't. So from my point of view, that we should do it separate from one to another. But as you say, that media role, I can mention about this thing and the way that media itself is somehow contradictory to its role, because as you know, you said that media has a role of educating people. Yep, okay, good. Then once you are educating someone, then what you will do the next day? So it is always, but definitely there are people who you need to educate the next day or the other day, next day after next day. Definitely there will be someone.
But educate is meant, I think, more about things that are really about issues that you normally don't hear about. For example, you can educate people about certain topics, like for example about history or cultural themes that you bring closer through media. I don't think there's a better tool to really do that than media, because you can tell the story so unbelievably effectively.
Yep.
I think the part where we all need to be careful for is, at one point, do you influence another person in their free decision making, and at one point do you just deliver information to inform and educate?
Yeah.
And I think those are two different ways.
Yeah, and to inform, which is again now in this era of information, everybody knows everything, almost. As I see, that people come to know the thing from many different process, or channels. So once you want to inform something, the main threat is people are already informed, maybe. Not in the right thing they are informed, or maybe they are already know the wrong things of the incident or something. So media should take a role. So what should be the right thing to be to inform the people? But as you know,
I have a problem with that. I'm going to challenge you on this one right out of the bat, because who determines what's right and who determines what's wrong?
Yeah.
No, this is a self-thinking thing.
Yeah, of course. So media, once you are self-motivated, or maybe once you are somehow compromising on the thing, or compromising the content, so maybe you are also doing the wrong thing that people shouldn't know from you. So yeah, you're right that who will determine what is wrong or what is right.
I think,
but at the same time, it is definitely there is a right version of any incident. There should have a right version. So media people should bring that to the people.
No, I completely disagree. So obviously there we really disagree on that, because I think there is no one can say this is right and this is wrong, because what you may see as right, I may see as wrong, and vice versa. But what I do think media can do is bring a whole spectrum of different
Right.
opinions and
What is
invite
facts?
people to come up and come up with their own conclusion and judgments, and actually look a little deeper into something versus just taking at face value. That way we sort of teach self-thinking. And I give an example. So when we talked a little bit about the evolution of the media landscape. So we talked a little bit about how it started. And then later on, first was all the public broadcasting, I guess, going back even before we were born, was mainly the public broadcasting, and then you had commercial broadcasters. And then, of course, there was this time that you had all the state media evolve, because everyone sort of began that information war a little bit and trying to influence another country or the opinion leaders of a different country in a certain way. So that has sort of changed, and then came social media, and sort of then broke it all down. But I think it's really important, if you look at all the different opinions out there, at least we still had a spectrum of a lot of different opinions. And what was so important, and we actually made a point on that, because I know I ran once a campaign for viewers, because I was working for a network that had all sorts of different international channels. So it was really important for viewers to understand where the news is coming from. Keep this in mind. Whoever makes the news, you have to keep in mind what's the purpose or the intent of someone who makes the news. So you have to kind of learn a certain media literacy in a way.
Yep.
And know where the news is coming from, and put this into consideration, right? Which is something I think nowadays, since we only seem to have two opinions, we don't have like a spectrum of opinion anymore. It seems to be more two opinions. So we have one that says, the one on the left and the one on the right, though I will say the media landscape generally is a little bit more left-leaning. It's actually definitely more left-leaning than right-leaning. But that also led to more alternative media than going more in the other direction.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. But one thing that I can also add with you, that is actually people, you need to inform them, but definitely that is very important. But, people do have their own opinion already. So nowadays what media is doing, that what people really like to know or really like to hear from you. So media is deciding, is producing a content in a way how the people like it.
Well, they don't.
Like
the credibility is 11%.
And that is the reason
don't.
media is losing its credibility. Yeah, I used to use one example from my school day, like when I was studying mass communication and journalism in Dhaka University. My teacher, there was a common example that he used to give us, that is, what Washington Post thinks today, the rest of America think tomorrow. So that was a saying. So, and nowadays, every media is doing that, producing the content, what the people really want to know, what they will like. In Bangladesh, we can see the same thing, that what people will produce that. And that way, so content, we are compromising on the basis of people's interest, on the basis of people's. So educating people is not there. Actually, people have already decided, and you are acting on that. So this is
which means the standard goes
the other way
lower
around
and lower, because we find the lowest common denominator, which usually means like you go what people are interested in, and then you see all these negativity.
If people doesn't like it, if it is a very good content from your part, maybe sometime you have produced very good content and very good report. But once you have published it or broadcast it, nobody is watching it or viewing it, maybe, or reading it, because they have no interest on this. And if you publish something they do have their interest, then they are there. So actually, Now, yeah, we shouldn't escape of it, because we should take a role that what people should know, or how their media attitude can be changed, or how they can their media literacy should be. All this area journalists need to work now.
I would agree, and if you actually look back in history, and that's not just for television, I think that goes back, and print also, way back actually, when print was invented. Their media had definitely an extremely important role. When you go back and think about Martin Luther, for example, in 1517, I guess,
Yep.
he published his 95 theses, and he put them on paper so that everyone could suddenly see them, and though even people, not everyone could read, in fact few could read, but they would read it to others and things like that. So that had a positive impact, a revolutionary impact in terms of really bringing society forward. That's a classic example as to when it had a really, really good purpose. But then when you look back, there are also how it can be negatively used. If you go back, for example, during the French Revolution, print media, the poor Marie Antoinette, actually, one of the reasons which led to the whole demise of the French king at the time and Marie Antoinette, was that there was print media who started really publishing nasty papers and articles against the queen. So they made her as a little pig, a cochon, and they impersonated her as such, and that led to the fact that people lost their personal boundaries and their line and their threshold and respect. And then they felt like, so what if she's just a pig? We can equally just go and drag her out. You see what I mean? Like, it's a process on both sides, so it can help build boundaries and understanding, but then on the other hand, if it's so negatively used, it can tear people down like in no time. And we see this today. Look at social media.
Yep.
The mob culture.
Yeah.
That is mob culture.
The mob culture, yeah, exactly. But when it started, like maybe last 2 decades, that we say, in our country and other countries also, in the subcontinent, of course. Actually, when the media are being controlled, when it started, the people, we cannot fight it back. When the maybe political power or maybe other economic power, they have started controlling the media. Yeah. So actually journalists couldn't fight it back. So they had to compromise in the way, okay, now we cannot. I was attending the GMF in 2017 and 19 as well. And I was, that time it was widely talked in the discussions, GMF, in Bonn, Germany, so where Global Media Forum. So where it was discussed that, okay, now we cannot fight against the political power, we cannot fight against the economic power, because journalism, we need to compromise. Okay, we are compromising in a way that we are publishing stories like maybe on the nature, maybe on the
fitting the agenda.
You have you gave a space for this, and all on that vacuum, actually was covered by this social media. It came and it produced something, and everybody is producing something, and the people are engaged in the social media. And now, day by day, the mainstream media has lost its own viewership, listenership, and readership.
Who decided, though, that the media had to be controlled? Remember back at the forum, do you remember who decided when it was time that the media had to be controlled and that the media could no longer speak up to the powers to be in politics? Yeah. What decade was that? Was that around the 90s?
It is definitely, in our country, it may be more later, like 20, actually millennium time it started. But before that, 90s, 80s was a golden time for Bangladesh media.
So that's when we suddenly you saw media a lot more basically going to bed with with politics.
Yeah.
And you see this actually not just like in a television thing. I mean, how often are they related? They marry each other, etc. You see media and politics have been in bed together for a long
and
time.
they marry each other.
That's exactly it. And I think that's part of the reasons why people have no trust in it
you're
anymore.
always nodding your head. Yes, you're right. Yes, you're right. The political people are saying something that
them
you
and
are
questioning
just
them and say, look, what you're doing doesn't make any sense, right?
So I'm talking now, but I had to stop lots of stories in my life
because of that. I know
because of
it
that.
It happened to me too, so I can attest to that as well.
So the story is almost same to all over the world.
Yeah.
So this happened actually. Nothing remained free for you. Okay, now we cannot. After 1 decade, we'll do. But now we see that we are lost almost. That we cannot do. Yeah.
Exactly. That's why I think we've seen this huge amount of independent media and alternative media cropping up for people to seek alternative voices to actually still voice things.
Yeah.
And the problem, though, is, and we have to talk a little bit about social media on this one, because I think with social media, what we've lost, social media is algorithm driven. Algorithm promotes things automatically in two categories. So you're against this side or you're for this side. Yeah. And so by definition, I think because it's so algorithm driven, polarity fueled, that we on social media, it's really hard to reach someone who's not in a particular camp, because the audience has been so segmented. Which before on television, you still had a larger audience, so you could at least reach some people from a different mindset, or some people would start thinking. But nowadays with social media, you no longer have that. You have one camp and the other camp. And so for us to have a dialogue is practically not possible, because there's so few in the middle who are probably, 0.5%, who then look at it and read it, whereas all the others, they go for that and that.
Yeah. This algorithm, I think, is the biggest enemy now.
I agree.
Because, it's a mind game. They're playing with they're playing with everyone. And you cannot, it's all about eyeballs, right? You cannot create more eyeballs. For actually the 750 crore people in the world, maybe it is only 1,500 crore eyeballs. Not more than that. So in the internet, maybe 300 or 300 crores are there. So you cannot create more. But what contents are attracting more eyeballs is very important. So if you create a good content and publish in social media is again an enemy. At the same time, I say is a foe and friend together, because once journalist has taken the social media as a friend, that social media will publicize my story in more way. Nobody is nowadays go for the URL, or open your channel. They see everything from the YouTube, because you have published your content in the YouTube, and asking people, okay, I'm keeping it in the social media, and you watch it from here, okay. And I remember in 2012 when not 12, maybe 16, when I was here in USA to cover the US presidential election. There was a colleague from BBC Bangla from Britain. He was also here. And he was telling me that we have started a new strategy, that is social first. That means BBC was not publishing their content to BBC website first. They published it in the social media first.
To see what the reactions were.
That was called social first. So this social first, you can see the real result out of that. So social first means they are, most of the people are following in the social media, so we are putting the content to the social media. Okay, now the problem is your content is now being overpowered by some contents which are not wanted, actually. Very unwanted contents are there. So this way, actually, media has lost its its own. And algorithm, you mentioned about that. I should say that you cannot even stop for a single fragrant of second if you are scrolling down the screen and somewhere you just stop for a fragrance of second, then this algorithm has caught you, and now you're getting only the contents that where you entered where that you really don't want to see, and you have no control on you because what content you really want, you need to search. Okay. Yeah. Then you need to search and rearrange your whole algorithm system. And who will do it? Is it every viewer will do it for you? Maybe you are an advanced viewer, so you are doing it. And most of the people are not advanced viewer.
But I think that's exactly the algorithm is part of the issue of why we're having just right now such a tight election, because it's almost not possible when you think about this that we're in a country with 340 million plus people and we're literally divided in the middle. I mean, no. So when you still had like media and television, you could still have people talk to one another. You could still reach a broader audience. But because it's all algorithm driven, polarity fueled, so when you have the social first content and you test it out, you're going to get the reactions from a particular camp. One's in this one and one's in this one. So one camp is going to react. The ones who like it, the ones who dislike it, right? Yes. So by definition, the ones who dislike it, they're not going to look at it. No one gives it a second thought because it's more of a validation of what you're already thinking, which is then re-emphasized basically by algorithm, by more content of the same kind. So we do not have this diversity. And the funny part is, it's actually not funny, it's pretty sad when you think about this. So the interesting thing is that we talk about diversity and inclusion, but what we're seeing is exactly the opposite.
Yeah. You're right. And one more thing I want to mention about this clickbait journalism that happened over the period. And this clickbait content, you can see that...
okay, for our viewers, would you explain the clickbait content, please?
Actually, clickbait content means is hooking the people from this social media mess. So where you are putting some content which is which they will definitely click on this. So baiting them on your content, because this happened when. This is also again a big smash on the journalism itself, because when it came up, this clickbait journalism or clickbait content, this has thrown the real journalism or absolutely
off. Yeah, because real journalism is very serious normally. I mean, you look at
which is not clickbait at all.
No,
which is not
the opposite of it. It's complex stories. It's not the easy stuff. It's not just the soundbite journalism of sensationalism, but it's actually going to it. You want to find out why something has happened and how it happened and all these things. And with the clickbait, there's no space for that. It's all easy entertainment. You have your sound bites there. That's it.
Okay, that's it. And once someone is getting popularity, as I say that whatever the content he or she is putting in is getting viewed by millions and millions. But you are working hard the whole day. You have prepared one content and it is not viewed. 2, 3, 4, 5 only counted.
Yeah, but that actually throws us back now to the audience and the viewer, because we have to ask ourselves as people and viewers, of course, what role do we as viewers have in that? Because, we can't just go out and complain about the journalism and say, oh, the media is all so bad. Well, it takes two to tango. So you have the media, you have the content providers, but then you also have the audience. So when you put yourself, when you're the viewer, think about yourself, what you're going to watch, what you read, what you click on, how you react to things. So I think there is a responsibility for viewers as well. I mean, if you go for those silly content and you're happy with this, well, then who's to blame? It's not the media, it's the person. If you take the popcorn and the chips and like to be on the couch, and don't get me wrong, there are times when you want to do that, and there are times when maybe not every day that's the thing to do.
Yeah.
So you have a responsibility as a viewer, as audience as well, because you as audience drive what you want to see. So we live in a complex world, and what do most people do? They look at a lot of them, I think, like to follow the easy entertainment. And I get that. When you work all day, when you're tired, it's natural for most of us that we just don't want to engage our brain, and we just want to watch something that's like easy to understand, etc. But I think we also need to understand that we're losing out on that.
Yeah, quality journalism, at the same time, we need some quality viewership. Quality viewing, quality readership is very important.
Yeah.
So quality journalism is definitely important, at the same time quality. But in this point, I want to share you something. And that is a point, again, point of view from Bangladesh, my observation.
Yeah.
I was talking with someone, maybe he is a university professor. I was talking with someone, maybe he is a physician, and maybe he is a very renowned lawyer. And they were referring some, like, oh, I read it from the, I read about this. You don't know that this happened? Like he or she is talking about a fake news. And I was asking, where did you saw this? Oh, he or she referring such a website which you never heard about. So this actually media literacy, or actually what I should say, is a highly lack in the top educated people, among the top educated people also.
Media
literacy,
yeah.
So which one they should read, which one not. I was writing.
I think they should read all of them.
I was writing a story on this, article on this, like diet your media. So media dieting, like you should, you shouldn't read all the junk thing. You shouldn't eat junk food. You shouldn't read junk content.
Right.
So that is very important. But how long you will fight for this people until they get themselves, as you mentioned, that they have this responsibility as well. So until they find themselves as at a responsible level, that will not.
Yeah, that's why I personally find this whole debate about fake news it's complete nonsense, actually. It's completely illogical, because who defines what's right and what's wrong? And even facts, yes, facts are important, but here's the thing, even with facts, when you look at facts, you may look at this table from the top and describe what it looks like. That's a fact.
Yeah.
I may look at the table from the bottom and describe what it looks like. That's a fact too.
Yeah.
So it's not so easy to compare, So I think that's why people have a personal responsibility to look into what they hear and go with really what resonates with them and makes sense to them. But then, of course, what we need are free, self-thinking people.
So, I can share you another experience that I also teach in the university. So, when I go for some discussion in the classes, usually students ask me, do you think that report is correct? Or that report is correct. Like this, they bring the stories. So I always tell them that don't ask me all these questions, because what I'm teaching you in the classes is this journalism only now possible in the heaven, not in at least in Bangladesh now. So I was thinking about students do have some. They come to the profession with some dreams, and in days they just the dream is broken.
I think it's become also very difficult nowadays, if you're a journalist, to really write good stories, stay true to yourself, stay true to the story, and true to what you observe in a climate that has become so difficult to navigate and operate for various reasons, because it's really becoming harder and harder for people to stay true to themselves. But, I used to say, and I think when you look at it from a spiritual side, it definitely makes sense. the truer you are to yourself, the more bound you are to go one day against mainstream. That's the definition of staying true to yourself.
Yeah,
right?
you're right.
You cannot bypass that, really.
Yeah. Actually, true is absolutely true. That is, I also want to commonly say this to other people. Like, once we are talking about fake news, I'm a journalism student. When I was studying journalism, my teachers were taught me about the definition of news. And news itself is a matter of fact. It's a matter of truth. So how a fake can be used, a fake word can be used before the news, because news itself is, it has its own quality to be true and to be the fact.
Yeah.
So that is very important.
Yeah. I want to change in those last few, well, actually, no, before we get to the last few minutes, I wanted to ask you one more question. So in this segment here, so when we talk about, we looked at the data, for example, and we know for that in the United States, particularly in the last 4 years, we have seen this giant erosion of trust in media. Of course, we also had, like, in the last 4 years, a political scene like none before, or at least not like coming to the forefront. So when you look at this, is there, from your observation where you're sitting, is there, what contributed to this further decline in media? Is there the Trump effect in there as well?
Yeah,
and I don't mean Trump effect
I want to answer this question by using two words, actually two phrases.
Yes.
Like, one is fake news factory, and other word is fact check. That evolved. These two phrases evolved last 4, 5, 6 years. Because of this fake news factory, you know, once there is a factory where the fake news is being produced, and once you have to create a system where the fact need to be checked in a software system. So because you are already out of the track, and you need to recover your fact, or you need to make sure that your fact is there. So you have to create a fact-checking system. And at the same time, there is a factory where the fake news is being produced. So you all know who were the producer of this. Actually, Trump effect is, of course, there.
Yeah, but I actually, when I talk about the Trump effect, I didn't mean the Trump effect negatively, like on former President Trump per se. What I'm saying is that I think what we've seen was that it became so vicious. It became more visible that media, who actually owns and controls the media, and if you think about 6 companies are controlling what, 95% of the media worldwide, that tells you who owns and runs the media, right? Yep. So when we talk about that, I think what this happened was that when I call the Trump effect, I think it became more evident how vicious and how much more was at stake for the powers who were in charge at the point, for the establishment, to try to come up and hold on and control it with all means, because they were threatened by someone who could possibly unseat them. And I think what we've seen, I would refer to the Trump effect simply because I think everything has unhinged in those last 4 years. And then we combine that with the increase of social media, which really isn't, there's not much social about social media. It's become the most unsocial thing ever.
Unsocial media,
yeah. I mean, people are isolated, people are living their own thing. We see mob culture, we see not at all what it was intended to at the beginning, where people thought, oh, you could stay in contact with friends. And yes, some of us still use it that way, but overall in the media, that's really not quite. I think social media at this point is almost done, at least in this version.
Yeah, you know, that is also
look at the stocks.
Your identity is at stake.
Yeah.
Everybody's personal information, privacy is at stake. And everything is not, we should anymore use at stake. It is already, they have lost it. in the social media atmosphere. Yeah, because from that point of view, like how social media is playing, yeah, you know, now it's faking yourself also. Because I was talking to other guy yesterday, who is a cybersecurity guy, who was asking me, don't declare your full name or full address in the social media. If you are somewhere and you are asked to keep your addresses, why you shouldn't put your full address there? It means that you are making me lying on something. So social media, because I'm afraid of, I'm not putting my full address or my phone number or my email address because I'm afraid that it may hackers may get it from, or so they may make business out of my information.
Adding again to the distrust, right?
So this is something you're throwing me into something where I need to lie. This is bad.
Yeah, no, I totally agree. So we've seen the social media become unsocial. Let's talk briefly about citizen journalism, which we haven't talked about, because there are great things about citizen journalism, of course. When you go and when things happen, particularly when you have countries where there isn't a free, well, actually right now there's almost nowhere free media anymore. But even still, if something erupts somewhere, you still have kind of people who can actually document it. So that's the good stuff. But on the negative side, citizen journalism also, I think, has taken the seriousness of journalism a little bit out of context, didn't it?
Yes. Yeah, citizen journalism, you know, this is actually we're talking like 5-6 years now, or maybe more than that. But we couldn't make it happen in our country, of course not. People actually, with this, there's something happened that people have started creating content. Not necessarily everybody is doing the wrong thing or something unwanted. Many people are bringing many important things in the media landscape or actually in the internet system, so you can avail them. So it helps us in the way that there is some people who even we couldn't know if this platform couldn't be established. So this happened that we have got many people who have actually, one person can write a very good poem, or one person can can sing well. They're coming up. So this type of talents are being visible by this social media. But it should be only there. But it is being used as as a place where the fake news is being flourished, or is being I should say that is bringing in this platform, and that is making the whole journalism a problem.
Okay, so we have about 1 minute left. Future of media, what comes to mind, quickly?
Actually, to me, it is one-man army like this. There are people, journalists have started without any influence. They're producing their own content by themselves, and they're bringing it to the media.
To the public.
Maybe it will give a...
I still think, though, that maybe we are at a point where we can really rethink the role of media in general, including social media. I mean, there are a lot of talks and new ways of looking at Web 3.0, for example, as the next version to use technology and media for good, which would be quite a change from where we have been. So, you know, I think we need to start thinking about what could this new media or even new role for television look like. So that might be something to consider. Any last words for you?
Yeah, thank you so very much for having me. That's all.
So you still go with the journalism?
Yeah.
Producing content, meaningful content.
Yeah, I want.
Yeah, I think that's really important. Well, on that note, it's the end of the show. Thank you so much for watching. Thank you so much for being
Thank you
my
so
guest
much.
here. And as we said, I do think that television is ripe for a new role. So maybe you want to start think about this and share your thoughts. As usual, best on my Twitter. I think that would be a great start. Thanks so much. Have a wonderful evening. Good night.